Senator Vick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I think that we've heard some good arguments as to why we should oppose the exchange. But I would like to take a few minutes and talk to those who oppose Obamacare but support them at the exchange and try to give them one reason to change their mind. I have struggled, honestly, to figure out why people who support or who oppose the Affordable Care Act support the exchange. These are good people. These are my friends, and we agree on many, many things. So I really have struggled to figure out why they support a state exchange. Here's what the proponents of the exchange say. If we're going to have an exchange, and we've heard this several times already this morning, it is better to have a state exchange. It's better to have Idahoans run it. And they use the example of the DEQ, that people would rather deal with people here in Idaho than they would deal with the feds. And I agree with that. But I do have one problem with that, and that is we have the DEQ and we still have the EPA. The EPA is now 43 years old, and I don't see it going anywhere. And my goal is not to make the Affordable Care Act more tolerable. My goal is to eliminate the Affordable Care Act, to have it stopped. The next point that proponents make that I want to address is the issue of it's the law. Because many supporters say, well, we need to do a state-based exchange because Obamacare is the law of the land. So I did some homework. I'm kind of an amateur history buff, and so I did some homework. And when I looked through the history of this country to see what's been done to change bad laws, I don't see examples. I didn't find examples where we changed a bad law by complying with the law. This strategy that I see here of resisting by complying is new, and I honestly don't expect it to have much success. Well, what does history teach us? I'll start with a story we all know well. In the very foundation of this country, when we were colonies, the British government imposed taxation without representation. And what was our reaction? It wasn't, let us run the tax system because we can do it better. No, they had a tea party. And later on in our history, when the Supreme Court upheld the Fugitive Slave Act, did those free states, those states that opposed slavery, did they say, well, I guess the best we can do is when those slaves get into our free states is make sure that we take care of them well, clean them up, and send them back home to their slave owners? No, they did not. They formed the Underground Railroad, and they got those people to Canada. Those escaped slaves, they helped them escape. During the Civil Rights Movement, when Rosa Parks became famous, and as a matter of fact sparked the Civil Rights Movement, did she do that by taking the very best seat at the back of the bus? No, she did it by sitting at the front of the bus, by not complying with the law. History teaches us we don't change a bad law by complying with it. Now, if you want Obamacare to be run in the best possible way for people in Idaho, you may want to vote for the state exchange, because we may do it, very well do it better. But if you want to reverse Obamacare, put an end to it, and encourage others to fight Obamacare, then you need to vote no. Is that all that needs to be done? Is to say no to the state-based exchange? No. But it is part of what needs to be done. Because history history again teaches us we don't fight a bad law by complying with it. And make no mistake, we have heard this in every avenue so far this morning. House Bill 248 complies with the Affordable Care Act. Are there still challenges ahead? Yes, there are. But if we give in at this opportunity to say no, we send a message that it's not worth the fight. But if we stand up and say we are willing to fight, we may embolden a citizen or 2 or 10 or 100 to join us in that fight. That, historically, is how you stop an unjust law. To me, taxing people for failing to buy insurance is unjust. What are a few other laws that were unjust? That there is no way we could accept now. But at the time, somebody thought they were a good idea, and they were upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States. And they were the law of the land. Well, I touched on a couple of these a little bit already, but the Fugitive Slave Act, we also, Japanese internment camps were held to be constitutional, and the separate but equal doctrine. And I'm going to just focus on one of these today, and that's the separate but equal doctrine. It stated that for different races of people, you could have separate accommodations as long as they were equal. Segregation. The law was upheld by the Supreme Court in the case of Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. How long did the United States live under this law? For almost 60 years. It was complied with and never changed. In nearly 60 years, the federal government never rewrote the law. When did it change? When those who were adversely affected by it stood up and said no. When they said, we are going to go down and enroll our kids in the neighborhood schools, in the schools that we should be able to go to. It wasn't those who complied with the separate but equal law that changed it, but those who defied it. In essence, the ruling in Brown versus the Board of Education of Kansas in 1954 said separate but equal was not equal. And it's interesting to note that this is the case that it's named after because of all the states who had this law. Kansas was doing the best job of providing equal schools. Kind of like, in my mind, how we might do the best job of running a state exchange. But when something is unjust, you don't get much credit for making a bad thing better. And to me, making a bad thing better is not good enough. But something else is missing in this debate as well. What I haven't heard from the proponents of this bill is what their next step is. The proponents haven't told us, once we implement the state-based exchange, how do we stop Obamacare? How do we roll it back? I haven't seen it in any of their dozens of handouts that I have received. Why is that? Because they don't have a plan to stop Obamacare. But they do have a next step. Their next step is Medicaid expansion. Their next step is full implementation in Idaho. That is what the healthcare industry wants. The supporters of the state-based exchange don't have a plan to stop Obamacare. Their plan is to implement it. One of the other points that they make is that nobody has done more to fight Obamacare than Idaho. Is the fight over? Are we waving the white flag of surrender? I believe that is what the supporters of this are saying. We fought and we've lost, so let's comply. Those that fought segregation didn't say what we want is separate but really, really equal schools. What they wanted was for segregation to go away. They wanted integrated schools. They wanted equality, and in order to get that, they had to defy the unjust law. In the same way, I don't want a slightly improved Obamacare. I want Obamacare to go away. And I understand this is just a first step, but it's a necessary first step. And I want to close with this. Well, I grew up in rattlesnake country. We knew there were snakes out there. We killed a few rattlesnakes in our yard, and we killed many rattlesnakes in our fields. And how did we deal with that? Well, we wore high-top leather boots. You'd probably call them cowboy boots, for protection. One summer, I personally killed 13 rattlesnakes. But you know what I didn't do? You know what my family didn't do? We didn't bring the snakes into the house to try to control them or to try to tame them. We didn't bring them into the house so we could keep an eye on them. We used boots. We had cats and dogs who, although they don't like each other, they don't like snakes either. And we did all of these things to keep the snakes at bay. The Affordable Care Act is unpopular, unworkable, and unaffordable. I can see in no way how we are keeping it at bay by implementing the state-based exchange. We are inviting it into the House. Because of federal law, Obamacare currently is the law in Idaho. But by passage of this bill, for the very first time, it will be the law of Idaho. And that is something I cannot do. And I will be voting no.